But yeah, it's difficult to.
Yeah, hi. I started the recording because all these conversations are interesting for everyone. So, hi, we are here at the 7th minute of the community monthly call. And we are pleased to present the 2.10 release with a lot of changes. And Andrea was mentioning that it makes a big improvement in memory usage in their experience. We also see the same experience, like 15% Grafana Labs. And there's a long release notes changelog because we are switching to do a quarterly release instead of 6 weeks. I think it was actually a little bit longer. We saw that it wasn't really productive for our customers to update as often for small bug fixes and less improvements. So we just moving customers to improve, to update, make bigger changes and less often. And it's also a toil for ourselves to prepare a release. So obviously it's a win-win for both. We will still bring the bug fixes in the patched version, so that should be fine. And yeah, there is a lot of experimental features also being delivered. I wanted to mention one of them, which is we have a bug fix, because I saw a lot of people interested in the read path limiting feature we are delivering. And between the release cut and now we found some bugs there, so we have fixed them and we will release a bug fix at some point. Not sure if the timeline yet because it's an experimental feature, but if you really want to test that out, I would recommend testing on weekly branch instead of the release branch, and at least until we explicitly release a bug fix for them. And you see the problems we saw were that the query frontends are retrying the too busy errors that ingesters say, and under certain conditions that can increase the load instead of actually lowering it. So just be careful. And I don't know, do you want to announce something else? There are some new changes in the 2.10 release branch.
I think this release is probably one of the releases with the highest number of experimental features. It's also due to the fact that we changed the release schedule, and now we are going to release quarterly. But I'm actually quite proud of the new experimental features we've worked on, most of which are about either performance or scalability. We also have some new features like ingesting exponential histograms using the OpenTelemetry format. But if you look at the release notes, we have several improvements in the store gateway, in the ingesters, in the write path between the distributor and the ingesters. Is there anything in particular you would like to talk about?
Not really on my side. We have discussed most of the things in the previous community call because we've been preparing this release for half month. So well, 2 weeks is a half month, so that's easy. So we mentioned most of them, and I'm not really sure. I think so this includes some changes to how label values can be counted and cardinality endpoint can be counted. And they can be used in terms of active series now instead of in terms of the in-head series, which can be useful for some people who use these active series trackers. I don't know. It's probably such a long list that it's overwhelming to think about specific features.
The circuit breaking changes between the distributor and the ingester. We added the ability to circuit break, and the code is there and it works more or less. We just don't have a lot of experience running it, and we don't have a lot of experience like with the system behavior when things go wrong. So that's why it's experimental. It's just we don't have any recommendations on how to actually use that and operate it yet.
There's also something I would like to mention, which I'm not sure we talked about during the previous community call, because I think we merged the PRs after that, which is about a couple of improvements we did in the store gateway. So the store gateway keeps the smaller version of the block index on the local disk, which we call the index header, which is about the 2% of the index in terms of size. And in order to query a block, the store gateway needs to load the index header beforehand. We have a feature which is enabled by default, which is called index header lazy loading, which just loads an index header into memory once we receive the first query. Now, loading the index header from disk may be slow, and in our experience, the actual bottleneck is either the disk or the CPU. We did an improvement on basically we introduced a second version of the index header, which is more optimized for reading by the store gateway. And that's called sampled index header. So the first time a store gateway loads an index header, it looks for the optimized version in the object storage. If it's not available, it will rebuild the optimized version and upload it to the object storage and then load it. We have seen that loading the optimized version of the index header reduced by about 10 times the index header load. Another optimization we've done is the store gateway can remember all the index headers that were loaded at shutdown. And when you restart the store gateway will reload all the previous index headers before being ready to serve queries. Both features are experimental. They are disabled by default, and in the changelog, there are a couple of entries explaining which are the config options to set to give it a try. We are currently in the process of rolling out both features to production at Grafana Labs. Now, I didn't work on this feature. I'm talking about features built by others. So now I let Nick correct me.
Yeah, the sparse index header, our Heather, who had an internship over the summer, implemented that. It ended up we didn't persist it back to object storage. We only persist it to the local disk just to sort of reduce the scope of the feature. But yeah, it's been super beneficial so far.
Sorry, what's the difference between the previous and the old one? What is why is sparse?
So the sparse index header, it only keeps like one of every 16 symbols in memory, and then it uses a search to find the appropriate one when it's looking them up. So it's much smaller than like the full index header. So it's just less to load from disk when you need it. And when we were loading the full index header, we were dropping some of it and only keeping a small part of it in memory. So this just only writes to disk the things that we're actually going to keep in memory.
Thanks. Nice.
I think that we mentioned previously that TSDB had compaction, the early one, but we had more experience on this feature since we first talked about this, Marco, right?
Yeah. You mean the TSDB had early compaction, right?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, we completed the rollout in production at Grafana Labs. It's working pretty well. The idea of this feature, which is still experimental, disabled by default, is to trigger a net compaction, basically to cut the block for a tenant in one ingester if the number of in-memory series in the ingesters grows below a certain threshold. And the ingester detects that triggering an early compaction will significantly reduce the number of in-memory series. It's basically a feature that allows you, to keep the number of in-memory series down when there's a high series churning rate. So if you have your series churning way more frequently than 2 hours, 2 hours is the regular compaction period, you may give a try to this feature, which is called early compaction, because it will cut blocks from the ingester more frequently, but will push down the in-memory series, and as a consequence, will also push down the memory utilization in the ingesters. Andrea.
And is it safe to run it in production, or?
So we are currently running this feature in all our production cells, in all the 3 ingester zones, by selling in Mimir cluster. In every Mimir cluster, we deploy ingesters into 3 zones, and we are currently running it in every zone. But before that, we enabled it just in a single zone. We kept it running for several weeks there. So if you want to give it a try, my suggestion is to actually give it a try just in 1 out of 3 zones if you deploy in multiple zones the ingesters, because it's definitely safer. Otherwise, if you have a test or staging the cluster, my suggestion is to give it a try first there. Because since we don't have a very long production experience with this new feature, I don't feel super comfortable to say, yes, just roll it out across all your ingesters in production.
Yeah, like we have 3 zones and we have the multiple clusters, but we have one which is huge and the other one which is, which are a lot smaller. So it's always, sometimes we try things in one and everything goes well for a week, and then we go to the big one, and then just in the big one we found things. So it's very difficult to really, match in a test environment the big one. But yeah, like that is for sure. One zone at a time is what we do as well. Sometimes, just to segregate things, and then at least one zone phase, and that's fine. I will try that. Thanks.
Yeah, we do use multi-zone deployment a lot now to test experimental features. For example, we also deploy store gateways in multi-zone. So the features I previously mentioned, the improvements I previously mentioned about the store gateways were tested in a single zone first for some time, and then we rolled out to all 3 zones.
Makes sense.
Okay. I think we don't have anything else here right now. Unless you have any questions, Andrea.
Oh, I have many, but am I the only one? Yeah, if I can ask, we have one alert that is firing constantly, which is the continuous testing one, and I don't know why it's happening, but like the continuous testing pod can write to Mimir, and then it can read to Mimir, but then the values are wrong sometimes. So we have like the 1,000 series, and then some of them are wrong. The value is wrong. So let's say 990 are the same, and 10 of those values are different from all the others with the same timestamp. So basically but it doesn't happen always. Most of the time they're right. Sometimes they are wrong. And this happened with the latest version, with the previous one. I don't know how many. Like it has been failing for a while, but because we don't see, or it is not that visible for the production metric, we really don't know where the issue is. When with our test, the metric are there, they are right with the right values, right timestamp. So I'm not sure why that is happening, and I don't know if that is happening because of there is a real issue, or maybe the bug is in the continuous test. But looking at the code, it seems right. So have you ever experienced this?
I have to say that I saw this alert being somewhat noisy sometimes, and shame on us, but we haven't paid too much attention to it lately. So we'll take note and we'll come back and say if it's really working well. I just searched a moment ago and it's firing right now. Well, it fired yesterday in itself. Nobody really declared an incident or anything similar. So
Yeah. We might remove it. It's very useful for a test environment, just to at least to see if you immediately see if the ingestion is.
yeah, we mainly use the load tester for the clusters where there's no traffic at all. So we just set up and there are no tenants at all, and it's nice to have something writing and just checking the entire path.
Mm-hmm.
But there's probably something off with the logic which checks the samples, because it does fire sometimes in cells where everything's going fine, but says something's wrong.
And there is an additional thing that we experience, but this one is from the latest version. The ingesters we have our SLO that is in breach because a lot more requests from the ingesters are rejected now. So because of the in-flash push request limit that is reached. I'm not sure why it's happening. I see that there are a few things I can do that might help. Like there are stuff with the the log logging is basically locking the different green thread, and basically because they are running in the same Linux thread, and there is the buffer logging now that is available. Maybe in that situation, if they start to reject things, and then the more they reject, the more they log, the more they block themselves, I think. But and with the new version, probably that doesn't happen because of the buffer log. But that is more of a how to alleviate the situation. But I don't know what caused that. The thing is that we can't tell too much what was the previous. I think that there are new metric that in the new version that tells how many requests are rejected because of the of that limit reach, and before they were not. Before they were just gauges, but the gauge doesn't tell much. If you lose the scrape at the exact number. Yeah. So it's different. So it's impossible to compare exactly that part. How was the situation before? So I don't know if you experienced something similar.
So we did experience some constraints on writing the logs that the requests have been rejected. And that's why we started introducing this buffered log, plus we have removed some logs for some errors that don't make sense, like ingester is starting. Okay, it's starting. We know it's starting. There's no need to log that. because we've had several incidents where logging these errors actually blocked the entire ingester because it couldn't write on the standard output, which is a file on Docker.
Is it possible that the ingester as well because of that if they are killed?
Yeah, because all of them accumulate the requests before they reject them or actually do something with them.
Okay.
So we saw that the request was received and it was rejected, and after rejecting it, it had to log that it was rejected. But during that time, more requests came in, and all of them were rejected. But they already started reading the body, so there's just a lot of payload coming into the ingesters, and that's how we assume that all the ohms happened to us with this login stuff.
Yeah, we had a big outage where all the ingester in all the 3 zones basically collapsed at like the same minute, all of them. And then, it took a while to just start them. And yeah, I can't explain too much because the metric don't show, the probably because they all die at the same time, even the metric probably is not collected, or it's not even updated probably. So the value are like misleading there. So even if they say there was no increase of traffic, maybe there was increase of traffic. So it's a little bit was tricky to debug, and we don't have a clear answer. And then looking at the open issues, I saw those about the logs, and then I said, okay, maybe it is something related, but maybe it's not. That is. So do you think that it's good to try that?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend that.
Okay.
We also removed a bunch of the logging that the ingesters were doing in response to these errors and just replaced them with the metrics.
Okay, thank you. I will try that then.
Okay, anything else? Or we got 30 minutes back.
Well, thank you again for the amazing work.
Thank you for coming.
Andrea, have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Have a nice day. Bye.
See you. Bye-bye.